the Nordic countries form an integral part of the Arctic. For more than 3 decades, the Nordic Council of Ministers has been actively engaged in the Arctic. The aim of our new Nordic Arctic program is twofold. One, building resilience, and secondly, strengthening local communities. Resilience is all about people. It's about people-to-people cooperation. Through our Arctic program, the Nordics wants to empower and contribute to social, economic, and environmental sustainable Arctic societies. We are committed to fostering attractive and inclusive Arctic communities. The key is that everyone, from children and young people to the elders, are empowered to shaping their own future. We aim to create opportunities to contribute to self-sufficiency, evolving tourism, local food culture, and modern connectivity in the Arctic. The Arctic is immensely marked by climate change, and we will foster a sustainable Arctic region. The Nordics wants to contribute to a future that strengthens the unique character of the Arctic while ensuring resilience for generations to come.
Good morning, dear friends of the Arctic, dear friends of the Nordics. It is my great pleasure on behalf of the Nordic Council of Ministers to welcome you today as we come together to mark 30 years of Nordic Arctic cooperation. This year marks a significant milestone. 30 years ago, the Nordic Council of Ministers launched its first Arctic cooperation program. At that time, the ambition of the governments was clear: to strengthen cross-border people-to-people cooperation in the Arctic, grounded in shared Nordic values of trust, openness, democracy, and sustainability. 3 decades later, we can say with confidence that this ambition has contributed to the Nordic Arctic region. The Arctic program is an important instrument in enabling concrete north-to-north cooperation across the Arctic. And today, we want to celebrate just that. Across borders and communities, policymakers, researchers, local Arctic civil societies, indigenous peoples, and youth have worked together to build knowledge, strengthen societal resilience, and foster mutual understanding. The program has supported over hundreds of projects that have delivered meaningful results for people living in the Arctic. At the same time, we are all acutely aware that the Arctic of today is not the Arctic of 1996. And for those of you who were here for the Prime Minister's speech, I think we got a very eminent presentation of how things have changed rapidly and dramatically over the last 30 years. Climate change is transforming the region at an unprecedented pace, and geopolitical developments are affecting the region more directly than before. This presents new challenges, but it also highlights the continued and growing importance of dialogue and cross-border collaboration. While today's developments create uncertainty, they also underscore why Nordic cooperation is more important than ever. This brings us to why we are gathered here today. This session is not only about reflecting on the past, it is also about looking forward. Today's discussion serves as the official kick-off of the Nordic Arctic Conversation Relay, or samtalestafett in the Scandinavian language, a year-long series of dialogues hosted by the Nordic Council of Ministers. From Tromsø, the conversation will continue across the Nordic countries, at Future Greenland in Nuuk, at Nordic Democracy Festivals all through the summer, Arctic Circle in Iceland, and at COP31 in Turkey in the fall, and many other forums. The insights, reflections, and debates that begin here today will travel with us all through the year. Our aim is simple but ambitious: to foster dialogues on shared challenges and opportunities in the Nordic, Arctic, and beyond, while making Nordic cooperation more concrete and inclusive. In today's session, we will explore 3 interconnected themes. First, we will look back at 30 years of lessons learned, highlighting concrete examples of what Nordic cooperation in the Arctic has achieved across borders and communities. Second, we will address how the reality of a changing Arctic affects our cooperation, bringing about both challenges and opportunities, examining the possibilities that emerge when we work together. And third, we will look ahead, asking what models of partnerships can help ensure societal resilience, inclusion, and sustainability in the Arctic over the next 30 years. We will start with a keynote intervention by the Norwegian State Secretary, Eivind Vad Petersen, followed by a panel discussion moderated by Svein Vigeland Rottem, Senior Researcher at the Fridtjof Nansen Institute. And after the panel, there will be a Q&A session, and we do hope that you use the opportunity to engage with the panelists. Let me conclude with this. Cooperation is not a given, but it is necessary. Over the past 30 years, the Nordic-Arctic cooperation has shown that shared responsibility can lead to shared solutions. Our task now is to carry on this legacy, adapting it to new realities, while also staying true to the Nordic values that brought us together in the first place. With that, it is my pleasure to open this session and give the official kick-off for our relay conversation, and hand the floor over to you, State Secretary Eivind Vad Petersen. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and a very good morning to you all as well. Dear Nordic friends, friends of the Arctic, it has been said that an optimist approach to life is to say that any excuse for a celebration is a good excuse. But these days, dealing with Arctic issues, it does feel really good to actually have an occasion of genuine celebration when it comes to Arctic issues. So thank you for that. Thank you for taking this opportunity of the 30-year mark for the first Arctic Operation Program of the Nordic Council of Ministers to take stock and to look ahead. It's a special personality trait. It's not the most sympathetic one. It's fairly common among men of a certain age that when asked to address an issue or to talk about someone else, they end up talking about themselves. I will try to avoid, but I'm just going to fall into this trap a little bit because when dealing with the Nordic and the Arctic approach, I can't help but simply point to my own background and my own family. If you have a look at my name, my first name is an old Norse Viking name, Norwegian Icelandic. My middle name is from my Danish grandmother. And my surname is from my Swedish great-great-grandfather. And to all Finns in the audience, I spent my childhood growing up in Kirkoniemi, the most Finnish part of Norway, the border town in the far northeastern corner of our country, just a few kilometers away from what was then the Soviet and became the Russian border, and from Finland as well. So indeed, Nordic and Arctic cooperation, it's personal and it's a family affair as well. Because when considering cross-border cooperation between Norway, Sweden and Finland in the north, and with Iceland and the Kingdom of Denmark across the sea, it should always be remembered that the basis for what we do was laid down long before anyone thought of establishing the Nordic Council of Ministers. Indeed, the Council itself was established on the basis of this close kinship, rooted in history, in culture, and indeed in family bonds as well. We are not far from home, in any sense of the word, when we visit another Nordic country. The primary objective of the Nordic Council of Ministers should be to create forums and channels to facilitate and remove obstacles to exchanges between us, not to invent them in the first place. The closeness, the solidarity, and the seemingly effortlessness with which Nordic countries can interact are very much envied by other regions in the world, and rightly so. But when asked what the secret is to replicate our success elsewhere, we often come up short of answers. Historical and social preconditions are not easy to replicate. There are, however, a few lessons that I believe can be shared among ourselves and as well as others, and that are perhaps less dependent on the specific circumstance. One is that Nordic cooperation is built on a set of principles. On international law, national legislation on human rights, rules-based world order underpins our policy making our formal decisions quite predictable and the results fairly reliable. That removes uncertainty and it adds trust, both aspects of our cooperation that reduces costs and contribute to good outcomes. Nordic cooperation is also geared towards pragmatic problem solving. Our governments, whether they be on the local as well as regional or national level, are elected on programs essentially aiming at solving the problems, the challenges that people actually face in their daily lives. And we better deliver if we want to stay in office beyond the next election. This approach, this sentiment adds a good measure of pragmatism to politics and also quite a bit of continuity between governments over time, even when we represent maybe different political parties. The North Atlantic NORA cooperation of the Nordic Council of Ministers is a good example, including coastal Norway, Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. This framework contributes to sustainable local development by supporting concrete cooperation projects on themes like tourism, security of supply, local attractiveness, business development linked to marine industries. But friends of the Arctic, we do live in dramatic times. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has fundamentally changed the preconditions for cooperation across borders in the north. From being seen as a potential partner 30 years ago, Russia today is clearly our most immediate and greatest security challenge. Sweden and Finland have become members of NATO as a result, and Norway, Sweden, and Finland now cooperate closely to strengthen our defense capacity and to secure the greatest possible impact from our joint investments. Concerning Greenland, you heard the Prime Minister just now, many of you. Let me be very clear from my government, and I know I can speak on behalf of the other Nordic countries as well. We stand firm in our full solidarity with the Kingdom of Denmark. The future relationship between Denmark and Greenland is for them, and only for them to decide, no one else, in full respect of the Kingdom's sovereignty, territorial integrity. And at the same time, strengthening Arctic security through allied engagement is not only called for in Greenland, but indeed also on this side of the Atlantic. Last August, we from the Norwegian government side presented our new High North strategy, where the fundamental changes to our security policy environment made a strategic rethink necessary. Although the main goal of our High North policy remains the same as before, robust and thriving local communities where people want to live, strengthening national stability and security in the process. The Arctic is indeed our home. Almost 10% of Norway's population live in the Arctic. Demography and economic development are intrinsically linked to security. Population means presence, activity, engagement, and our defense engagement has its roots in real people's real lives, in communities they identify with. Simply put, without security, no people. Without people, no security. A reinforcement of our defense capacities must also be built on robust local communities and in return bring gains to people's daily lives in economic activity, in logistics and transport, in underpinning leisure culture activities, and in bringing, of course, security and safety. Nordic cooperation, too, is increasingly now emphasizing resilience and preparedness. The results of our efforts can only gain by looking across borders, seeing what we can do together with our neighbors. And as we speak, work is well underway to see how civilian cooperation across borders can underpin our defense efforts in transport, in emergency preparedness, in surveillance and mobility, as well as in services and community life. I am sure that the Nordic Council of Ministers, by its strategic engagement and by the innumerable concrete projects it supports, will contribute greatly to these efforts, and by solving everyday problems, by strengthening the principles that guide us, and by nurturing the culture we build upon. Happy anniversary, and thank you so much for your attention.
Hi everyone, and still many people here. Very, very good. I would like to bring up the panel first, and then I can introduce myself and the panelists. So please, Sara, Lars, Inga, Olja. I guess you can sit there. Okay, welcome. Looking forward to this. And I have to admit, I'm a bit honored to be asked to, well, be part of this celebration. My name is Svein Vigland Rotem. I'm a senior researcher at the Fridtjof Nansen Institute, mostly working on the Arctic Council, but on Nordic-Arctic cooperation as well, and Arctic geopolitics. So I'm really looking forward to hear your thoughts. And what a panel we have here. This mic is a bit... Is it okay, the sound? Okay. Sara Olsvik, great to have you here. Looking forward to the discussion. You've been clearly one of the most eminent voices in Arctic cooperation for, well, a couple of decades now, really. So you've been part of this Arctic flying circus for a long time. Chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council. Great to have you here. Lars Kullerud. Great to have you here as well, president of the University of the Arctic. Well, been around for ages, even before everyone else started to talk about the Arctic. And we have Inga from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, senior advisor, been doing Arctic science policy advice for, well, quite some time as well. And lastly, and I haven't met you before, but I'm really looking forward to hear your thoughts as well. So, and I have to remember, I've forgotten your name, so that's, sorry. Ole Martin, because you have this middle name, Melbe Nygård. Yes. Let's start, Sara. Okay, I would ask initially, what are the experiences and best practices that can be shared across the Arctic region and among the Nordics on the indigenous question and rights in the region?
Well, first of all, Røyana, thank you so much for the invitation to this panel. I look forward to our dialogue, and also I'm so happy that this 30th anniversary is taking place now, where we are all gathered at this extremely important moment in time. And also, I think that the Arctic Cooperation Program of the Nordic Council of Ministers has been a really, really important tool for indigenous peoples to really build further on the cooperation that already existed at the time when it was established 30 years ago. For indigenous peoples cooperation, we actually can go all the way back to 1973, where Inuit and Sami and indigenous peoples from Canada met in Copenhagen, again, strongly supported by the Parliament of Denmark. It took place in the Parliament building at Christiansborg, this first historic Arctic Peoples Conference, which brought together indigenous peoples who had and shared the fact that we live across borders, that we have lived and thrived in the Arctic for time immemorial, predate the concept of states, and have governed and lived and developed our societies for so long, all of us as indigenous peoples in the Arctic. And the 1973 meeting was really a start to uniting around some of the core principles that also then were fed into the work in the UN to develop the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which we know that the Nordic states have always stood very firmly on and supported in every aspect of the international work. The Sami Council will celebrate its 70th anniversary this year. We from the Inuit Circumpolar Council will celebrate our 50th anniversary next year. And so it's important, I think, to remember that that cooperation that is cross-border is inherent to us as indigenous peoples. And therefore, any initiatives that supports the people-to-people and cross-border cooperation that's been so vital for us, especially in the times, for example, when ICC was established in 1977, we were in the midst of the Cold War. And we needed to take very special efforts to ensure that we were able to work together with Inuit, for example, in Chukotka, Russia, where our fellow Inuit also live. So I think there's a very important lesson to take from the political willingness and perseverance of indigenous peoples to calling on and demanding that everyone around the Arctic gather around one table. And that resulted also in the establishment of the Arctic Council the same year in 1996. And really also understand the role of indigenous peoples in paving the way on that cross-border thinking as a circumpolar Arctic. So there are challenges in terms of maintaining that now, but we are here and we have met now here in Romsa, Tromsø, again with the Arctic Council chairship as indigenous peoples, and everyone around the table participate in those meetings. So again, now we are in a time where we can see that we as indigenous peoples are the ones who can continue when the states cannot in the same format. So during these challenges, I really think that there's a responsibility by the Nordic states to also look to what kinds of governance systems have we built in the Arctic and understand them as more as nation-state governance arrangements. And that leads me to the Abadabai, kind of, because Nordic states, and again, I'm from Galashitinat, Greenland. I am so warmed by the heart to feel the strong support for Galashitinat, Greenland from the Nordic states. I have seen a change also in the rhetoric or the way that state leaders among the European states talk about Galashitinat, now very clearly underscoring our right of self-determination. Let's make sure that that is also the reality in implementing our rights in each of the Nordic countries. Because we also have to face that there are challenges still also in the Nordic states, frontrunners on the international stage, but continues to be an implementation gap internally within the states. And I think that's something that we could take and learn from now, and take the drive we have right now and the unity we have around the values and the principles that were also so eloquently mentioned by the State Secretary on territorial integrity, human rights, the rights of self-determination, considering and recognizing all peoples as equal under international law. And that really I think is a challenge for Nordic states sometimes. And now is the moment where we need to see Nordic states being the champions in every aspect, both nationally and internationally.
Thank you, Sarah. What is kind of interesting is that when we see at the Nordics, borders doesn't matter, but in the world, borders clearly matters. So that's an important message to bring in. Thank you. Lars, as I mentioned earlier, you've been around for quite some time. And as president of the University of the Arctic, how has Nordic Arctic cooperation evolved during these 3 decades? What are the key messages from your period as a president? How is the Nordic a key part of this?
It has been 30 years with an ebb where maybe very many have been of the view that we don't need this Nordic cooperation. It's not so important. We have the EU, we have the peace and collaboration everywhere. Just now, we have seen a total change in that. And I'm extremely grateful that the Nordic collaboration, some stubborn members of parliament and bureaucrats have kept this thing alive, because it shows how important it is now. And that demonstrates the necessity to keep such instruments and good relationships. And I would say use cases. When we look at who do, since it's my domain, Arctic research and work together in the north, if you combine Canada and the Nordic countries, it is the biggest Arctic research nation in the world. In the center of that is Greenland. And of course, we should see now for the coming years that we move the office of the Nordic cooperation between Canada and Northern Europe to Greenland. That is a logical place of that central office. We should move more focus to that northern collaboration among those which are peaceful, want to work together. We see that the same countries need to go through accepting all the wrongdoings through colonistic systems in education and research, in governance, in decision making. And we have an opportunity between us because we are countries which are willing to take that talk, many of us. And I think that is a fantastic opportunity we are now facing, that we can actually produce a different kind of world. If you look 25 years into the future, the world will face global sea level rise, collapses in Antarctica, which will produce mass movement of peoples. But we need something that keeps things together. And this alliance between, I would include Canada and the Nordics as a family of the North, the homeland of Sara's people, and a few others peoples, are maybe a flagship for the world, but also the place where it's possible. Europe will be dependent on that partnership. And that because of resources, but also access to pristine nature, saving the climate, and keep it's a good place for living. And that is possible thanks to the fact that we have this collaboration. So this persistent funding of the Arctic program, I look forward to the coming International Polar Year, where the Nordforsk become the common polar research instrument for the whole world, where the Nordic collaboration and together with Canada shows what is possible, where we train the youth, build next generation in a peaceful and nice manner, that we get leaders like Sara who take control in this region, and we have a good coexistence between white like me and the indigenous peoples like Sara to run this region in a very nice and peaceful manner. It's absolutely possible. We have been trying that in this ebb of 30 years peace and collaboration, which may also have been a problem. The fact that we get forced to stand up for values, the fact that we get forced to prioritize what's important, also give us an opportunity. Now it is decision on resource security for Europe means someone in the Arctic need to sacrifice land to open for a mine somewhere. And the way that's done, we can stand up for values where we do it in a different way than just go and grab. The decision is done by those involved. Everybody understands it's needed. The same applies to energy supply. When it comes to transportation in the northern part of the Nordic countries, building railroads and new roads, we have dreamed in Norway about a railroad to Tromsø from Oslo. Of course we have one, very almost, because it goes through Sweden and across lands of the Sami. And that's the way to build such things. We don't need those borders. We collaborate in this half Arctic North. The other sad story is, in a way, the demolition of academia and knowledge in the US. I really hope they don't totally collapse, but I hope that at least Europe see that picture and stand up and build together. There's one nation outside the Nordic plus Canada who is absolutely a leading knowledge country in the world, if you look a bit into the future, and that will be China. And India is aspiring to get the same way. And that is a development we just have to realize, because that's such a great population and so much education and knowledge in that country. And we need to have a dualism where we accept to build our own system for knowledge and decision-making and using resources in that Nordic-Canada friendship partnership, and also relate to and have a friendship with China, which is a big knowledge producer. She will replace the US as we knew US after World War II, as the big machine for knowledge in the world, and we need to live with it in some kind of a partnership.
I'll get back to that. That was some big words. So looking forward to the discussions afterwards. But I have to bring in the other panelists as well. Inga Nyhammer, in your daily work at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, how do you work with Nordic Arctic cooperation? What are the challenges and opportunities? What's like Norway's take on it?
Well, personal first. You introduced me as having worked with Arctic issues for a very long time. Well, I've actually been working specifically on Arctic issues for 3 years. But I have been in the service of the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for many decades. And as the Prime Minister as well as the State Secretary pointed out, the Arctic is a very strategic region for us. So I have indeed been working on Arctic issues for a very long time. And coming to work with the Arctic specifically, the Nordic dimension was obviously very, very important right from the start, and even more so today. Because when we started out, when I came to the section 3 years ago, it was we were in the Norwegian chairship of the Arctic Council, where the Nordic countries play a very important role. I chaired the Sustainable Development Working Group during the chairship with all the 8 Arctic states, but also the 6 indigenous peoples' organizations present at the same table, experiencing firsthand what Sarah just talked about, the importance of taking full account of the peoples of the North when you actually develop policies for the North. After the Norwegian chairship, I worked more specifically with the Nordic countries, trying to work on how to develop our cooperation in the North between Norway, Sweden, and Finland, particularly because we are very, very close up north for the future. The structures that we have today are not necessarily exactly the ones we will need for tomorrow. The Barents Cooperation was created at another time for another purpose, which is no longer there. In that cooperation with Russia will not be a major factor for our day-to-day work in the foreseeable future. But cooperation between Norway and Finland and Sweden in the north will. And how do we do that? Well, what we can observe at least is that cooperation between the Nordic countries is not only decided by ministries, be they prime minister's offices or foreign minister's offices or internal minister's offices. It starts from the bottom up. People create cooperation structures when they need them and for the purposes that they themselves identify. So when we set out our High North strategy, that was actually elevated to a major principle. The cooperation structures for the future should build on the needs that are recognized by the regions of the North themselves, but of course with support and backing from the capitals. I think what the State Secretary pointed out of the Nordic countries having a lot of history and culture in common, and that it's a really very fortunate basis to be able to build on. But that you are close to each other is not, it doesn't necessarily mean you're best friends. I mean, the last time Sweden was at war, it was with Norway. So, although that is, a couple of centuries ago, it still is a fact, and we see it replicated all over the European map, that closeness does not necessarily mean friendship, but it is a good basis for it if you go about wanting to create it. And in preparing for today, I was reminded that the Arctic Council's Youth Conference was perhaps a very good example of where we could go to the future. It was very heavily supported by the Nordic Council of Ministers, by the way, and we were very grateful for that, because that support made it possible to bring into that conference here in Tromsø youth from all over the Arctic, because economy is often a big issue when it comes to youth, and travel costs and all of that. But what was most, and it was a novel concept in that for the first time it was not a conference organized for the youth. It was a conference organized by the youth through a committee established particularly for that purpose, and all the priorities and the way to go about them was done by themselves, with support, of course, from the Arctic Council Secretariat, but it was nevertheless driven by the youth themselves. And what was most striking for us observing that conference was the way they went about handling the different issues that they wanted to give attention to, because the exchange of experience, of knowledge, of views was the central issue, not to pinpoint differences or make dramatic discussions, but the very exchange of experience to learn from each other, to see the world from the other's perspective. That came out as a very essential feature. And I think that brings a very important lesson for the older of us. So if we can take that, as a basic principle to carry Nordic cooperation forward, also, I think we will be in a good place.
Yeah, because I've been witnessing in this at Arctic Frontiers that the youth perspective has been on the top of the agenda the last 2 years, and if you go like 10 years ago, it wasn't like that at all. So something has happened. Someone has, well,
it was in the Norwegian chairship. The overarching priorities were indigenous peoples and youth, and I think that conference was a good answer to those priorities.
And I guess in the fragmented world with a lot of information, create some kind of common places to find common solution is key. And it really brings you to you, Ole Martin. So what's your experience as being a youth in the Arctic?
Oh, sorry. Well, I first have to say I was surprised that I got invited to this, as I have not been alive for all these years that we have had Nordic cooperation. But I really like what you're mentioning here about the Barents cooperation, and that it's mostly based on this ground-up model for us in the Barents Regional Youth Council. That's what I experienced, at least, where it's us youth from all the regions that are gathering together. We are planning Generation Barents, which is our annual event, where we gather 80 to 90 youth from all over the region to discuss important issues, but also to experience the region. And I will come back to that, why that's important later. But being a youth in this sort of Arctic cooperation, it can be hard, but in the last 2 years, we can absolutely see that there is a lust from the decision makers to hear more from us. And that's also why it was very nice to have that Arctic Youth Conference here in Tromsø last year. And we also had that back-to-back with Arctic Frontiers, so that the things that were discussed on Arctic Youth Conference could also be taken into Arctic Frontiers, where the decision makers also sat. So that was a very, very good initiative taken by the Norwegian chairship, and will be taken further to next year, when it will be an Arctic Youth Conference in Nuuk in Greenland. So we are very happy that this initiative has started. When it comes to sort of this, we always speak about youth being the future, and youth being also the present. And what is important to me is that we need to prepare the youth for our Arctic future. We need to build this sort of Arctic identity that I'm not a Norwegian, I'm an Arctic resident. We had a session in Iceland on Arctic Circle, where this quote was, it was a beautiful quote. It was like, we live in different shaped living rooms, different furnitured houses, different shaped houses, but all of them are sat on Arctic soil. And to have this sort of Arctic identity will also bring this sort of easier cross-border cooperation. We heard at the Business and Burgers that one of the Swedish mayors really was frustrated that there was no Norwegian business in her municipality. And I'm thinking that if we can teach the next generation of Arctic residents that we are Arctic residents. We are not Norwegians, we're not Swedes, we are Arctic residents. That means in 20 years, maybe some Norwegian youth that are working in, let's say, in a municipality, or if they're working in business, or whatever they decide to do, then they have in the back of their heads that, yes, let's look more east to west. Because we, as I experience now, I'm studying in Trondheim, I'm studying marine engineering, and last year, 100% of the people graduating from my study program, they went to the south. They went south to Norway because the opportunities there are greater, or they look greater. But they really are not, as the Arctic is absolutely developing and getting more and more commercialized and attractive, I would say, for the next generation to live and settle and thrive. So we really need to build this sort of Arctic identity with the next generation. I think that's very important.
Do you think that the Arctic, to some extent, we have this saying that the Arctic is exceptional? Is it? Or is this like a flagship for the rest of the world that, well, is it something with the Arctic that, well, and please be personal as well.
Well, of course, the Arctic is exceptional. I'm from Harstad, which is the greatest city in the world. But what I really like to say when we speak about the Arctic is its uniqueness, where we have it's an extraordinary landscape and all that kind of stuff, but the unique issues that brings with it. I have been to so many European sort of youth programs and such, and they are always surprised to hear that when I'm going to university in Trondheim and I live in Harstad, that's a 14-hour drive, and they are shocked by that. I mean, if you want to drive from here to Vadsø, that's a 11-hour drive. If you want to drive from Ottawa to Washington, D.C. in the U.S., that's 9 hours. 11 hours from Paris to Berlin. So the distances and these unique issues that we have up north, it's kind of what divides us over these huge areas, but it's also what sort of brings us together, that we are not struggling, but we are finding solutions together in these vast areas. So that's what I really like about the youth, that we can find common ground, even if you live in Finland or Sweden or Greenland or Iceland. We can find common ground in these issues, and one thing is sympathize over these challenges, but also find solutions.
So tough conditions creates good solutions, maybe. So, but I would like to be a bit more concrete, because in this turbulent world, and well, how should we navigate? And what has Nordic cooperation achieved? What are the challenges and opportunities? And how do these current developments reshape the cross-border cooperation? And how will the future look like in 10 years? What are we active enough? Is there something lacking? Do you have some ideas on where to put pressure? Sara, or?
Well, I think, first of all, now we've heard a lot about the rupture. And I think we have an obligation in the Arctic to bridge the rupture. I think that it's been difficult before, and this time around, yes, it's very different from how it's been, for example, during the Cold War or earlier. But we also have an obligation as Arctic leaders, no matter what kind of leadership we're in, for indigenous peoples, for nations, for governments, for nation states, to really think carefully about what we do in the Arctic context. It needs special attention in the sense that, yes, there are changes that are really affecting also the global cooperation in terms of security, for example. But we cannot, hopefully, we'll see that the governments in the south of the states that are the Arctic states will think of the Arctic, as you say, with an Arctic identity. And think about what we have been able to build also in previous difficult times. Understand that we have common interests within the different interests, and that we have an obligation to live up to what we've all been saying, to maintain peace and cooperation in our region. And for us, that's a very tangible thing, us who live in the Arctic. Very tangible in Galashitin Greenland right now, for our families, for our everyday life. And I think we have seen through time, and this was also a very, very important point that was given in the keynote, that without security, no people, without people, no security. We have that lived experience in the sense that we have had forced relocations due to military installations. We have had forced relocations to make sure that there were people in certain areas that were facing sovereignty threats. That's just in Galashitin, but across the Arctic. And the other thing is also that we as indigenous peoples, for example, as Inuit, those family ties and that it being a family affair is also a very lived thing. The families that live across from Alaska and Russia among our fellow Inuit, the families that live across the whole, all of the borders across our homelands, they are families. They are not just distant relatives. So there's really something here that I think puts that extra pressure on all Arctic leaders to fully understand the nature of Arctic governance and how we've shaped and built it together over the past many, many decades. And really try to see and be adamant around that we need to bridge that rupture in a way that takes care of Arctic peoples.
I would like to, this idea of everything being about security, is that something you see in your daily work as well? It's all about security now. So everything is framed in hard security perspectives. Is that challenging, or is it, or it gives it some kind of new way of thinking and possibilities at the same time? Because when everything is about security, it could be anti-democracy, for example. It could be very challenging, well, bringing, especially for the youth, I guess, to be part of a democratic debate on the future of the Arctic. If it's only about geopolitics, what then, really?
Well, I think we have to recognize that the Arctic has fundamentally changed because of the internal development and external policies of Russia. I think there's no escaping that fact. We want to keep the Arctic Council alive precisely because of the reasons that Sarah described. It's very important, and there are interests that we have in common that cannot be promoted in any other way. But still, this has to be done in full recognition of the actual political facts. There's no escaping that. And when I travel to not only to Tromsø, but even further east towards Kirkenes and other places, I see that people living in the north are the first ones to recognize this fact, because they feel it directly in their everyday lives. And this is also important for the governments down south to realize that this is not, it's a daily reality. It's not only a political theory. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is about hard security, as you say. On the contrary, I think security today is built in many different ways. It's not only built by armed forces, although they are very important. It's also built by the resilience of the local communities, of people's needs in their daily lives actually being met. And the answer to this, fortunately, is also very much about cooperation across the Nordic borders. And this is where I think the Nordic Council of Ministers can also play an important role. Because when you see even what are the priorities in the High North strategies that we have developed, it's to strengthen transportation, to strengthen cooperation across borders on services, on cultural exchange, and even bordering on the security issues, on preparedness, on countering disinformation, all these things that make our society stronger in our daily lives and in a security perspective as well.
I guess.
So I don't think, I think it's false to present these as opposing issues, because the challenge is really to be able to see them in context and together.
Yes, I totally agree. And also, I would like to add that in my experience, when we talk about security and a changing sort of Arctic, it's becoming a geopolitical hotspot. And people are always asking us, like, how do you feel this in your everyday life? Like, how is it affecting you, and so on and so forth. My experience is that the youth in general have a very good ability to adapt to the situations that we are in. For example, in our council, the Barents Regional Youth Council, while the Barents cooperation is like a little bit up in the air, we don't really know where it's going to land now that Russia is out, and also Finland on a national level, and some of the Finnish regions. Where are we going to land? The Barents Regional Youth Council are still operating at, I would say, full pace, where we really don't have enough time on our hands to do all that we want to do. And you can also see at the youth councils that are locally in Finland, they were recently went through a change there, going from the, I think they went from the county sort of structure to the welfare structure. So it was but even them they have had issues, of course, but the youth have a tendency to change and adapt faster than the traditional systems. So that's
and the other.
yeah,
well,
you
the
older
rest of
guys.
us,
We are just better than you. So,
Lars, you would like to add something?
Yeah, I would like to say that security or resilience in a society is very much about family and cultures and languages and how you have knowledge. So what kind of knowledge systems you build. And that's the fantastic opportunity for the Nordic countries. I started with the Canada, Nordic world, and we have a very well-educated population. We have knowledge. We have engineers like you. And we have other people around who can actually make things happen. Then I want to quote a very eminent thinker and philosopher, the reindeer herders, Johan Mattis Turi. He tried to explain me about security, resilience to climate change, adaptation. He said that the climate change is a problem we, the reindeer herders, can live with and fix. Our problem is not that, but that someone sits in Oslo and Stockholm and decide where I need to be when. And those people don't adapt to climate change. We know we can move the herd when climate changes. We are not allowed to, because somebody make a rule, a regulation, a border. So what we need is to make a resilience, which is about closer to local, there is a knowledge, and use it for decision making. You cannot sit in Brussels and decide where it is snowing in Finnmark. It actually snows whenever it snows. And that is his kind of problem. And I think that is a fantastic opportunity for the Nordic Council to take a lead and change this thing. You need to have a mechanism in the future where the way economics and capitalism and knowledge production exist. We see it's a great success in Northern Norway to have a UIT in Tromsø with a hospital and everything. We see that building a university in Greenland helps Greenland being permanent and have a next generation who actually can run the country. We see the same, and now Canada and also building their own university in their own terms. Fantastic. And we need to accept that, and we cannot sit in the South and tell them that's not good enough or something, because there is a knowledge you need, and that resilience you get in the community through that. That leads me to another, there is a fundamental flaw in how we think about economics and efficiency, because we think it is more efficient that everybody sit on the laps in Oslos of the world, while we could be anywhere. And you could work with your fellow students who are engineer 11 hours away. And we have the internet, we have the infrastructure. You can just as well distribute a modern type of business idea through the Arctic. You don't need everybody to be in London or somewhere. And to build that future, we actually can do together. And there are so few people in the Nordic countries that we are together one of the biggest, one of the mega cities of the world with the Nordic together. Somebody could get the idea to move us all there. That doesn't make sense. We want to be spread out. Then we need to find solutions where innovations, businesses can exist cross borders between ourselves and the local entrepreneur, get help to stay wherever she wants to be and work with others. And there is access to resources, capital, opportunities, and regulations are made so it works locally, not decided somewhere where the banana need to be straight or curved in a particular way.
I find that, I guess that's what the Arctic Frontiers is all about, creating those kind of meeting places. So I guess Arctic Frontiers is the place to be when discussing these kind of questions. We need meeting places. Inga?
Yes, you made me think about, and you too, we have to recognize, though, that the Arctic is a special place for a couple of reasons. One are the distances. I've been sitting myself in government offices in Paris explaining that, no, your minister cannot actually go to Svalbard and back on a day trip. At least not if he wants to do anything else than sitting on a plane. Because the distances are very great. And we have to organize our societies taking that into account, be it by virtual means or by actually organizing so that we can make people's lives manageable in spite of the differences. This has to do with transportation organization too, which is a very big issue for many people living in the north, that they can actually travel to where they want without too much trouble, and preferably without having to go by the capitals. So that is one issue. But the other thing is, the climate. And there, I think, Arctic peoples have their great strengths. They know what limits climate places on them, but they don't exaggerate them either. Myself, I'm not from the Arctic. I come from Trondheim, although that, for people coming from southern Norway, is very far to the north.
It's not. It's absolutely not.
But it's absolutely not. But I studied French in Trondheim with a girl coming from Kirkenes, and I still remember what she told me. If we were to wait until the weather was good, until we did anything, we would never do anything. So that, being able to relate to the physical conditions as they are, but look for ways to overcome them and to do the things you want, even taking into account your natural surroundings. I think that is key to success. Finding real solutions that actually answer to people's challenges.
I guess we have all something to learn.
Yes.
When it comes to that. Well, we have slightly talked about Canada as well. I would like to bring Canada into the mix because I met a Canadian, a tourist. He was traveling to Tromsø yesterday to see the Northern Lights. And I said, well, Canadians and the Nordics, we have some sort of a common identity. And there's a lot of opportunity for cooperation. And I know that the Norwegian government have been working on creating more platforms and networks with Canadians. How do you see that in this Nordic-Arctic mix? And, well, clearly, in the situation we are with the Trump administration as well, is there a lot of possibilities, and what are the challenges if there are some? Sarah or Inga? Well, and I will open up for questions after that.
Well, I would say that we have a lot to cooperate with Canada about, realizing both the possibilities and the differences. Of course, Sarah will speak about the close kinship in terms of the indigenous populations between Canada and Greenland. But I think there are also lots of other points we have in common. Many political traditions, for example, we're often cooperated well with Canada on the international scene on many global issues. But there are also differences. It's a huge difference. I've been to Iqaluit, and I came home saying, the Finnmark coast is, a densely populated urban area compared to northern Canada. So you really have to realize the differences as well, and that the challenges are different. But we do have a lot to cooperate with Canada about, for sure.
Yes, definitely. Canada is a good friend. And I think that, again, here we have to point to and remember those ties we have across those state borders, not only into Canada as Inuit, but also the US and Russia. And in terms of the cooperation with Canada, I think that there's, in this change that we're seeing right now, a very good opportunity to further strengthen that. The Inuit Circumpolar Council have been very grateful and fortunate to be supported by the Nordic Council of Ministers Arctic Cooperation Program a few times. For example, in 2011 for an Inuit Leaders Summit, gathering Inuit leaders from all areas of Inuit homelands, and also there talking about specifically resource development and responsible resource development, developing the Inuit Circumpolar Council's own declaration, setting out the principles around self-determination on resource development. And the same in the last fall, in October 2025, we had the first Inuit Women's Summit, also supported by the by the Nordic Council of Ministers. And again here, the thing for us is that we are able to create those events and gatherings, being the people we are, who live across those state borders. And I think that there's, one takeaway from this should be that the Nordic cooperation needs to support exactly also those ties that exist among us as indigenous peoples that go in through all of these Arctic states. And for us Inuit, those are the 4 states that I've just mentioned. So, and then the other thing is that in Canada we also see, like in the Kingdom of Denmark, as we now say, a very advanced self-government arrangements of different kind. And that is also a very big change in Arctic governance that we have to be mindful of in this new round of increased tension. We have our own governments. We have established Inuit to Crown partnerships, as they call them in Canada. We have in Gardaghly introduced home rule and self-government. We have our own parliament and government. And those arrangements are very diverse, but they are there and they are reshaping the Arctic. The decisions we take as Arctic peoples with self-government are also shaping the Arctic policies of the nation states. So considering us not just as passive spectators to the development, but consider us as active decision makers in shaping the Arctic also in these difficult times. And the challenge will really be in these times of increased tension for the states to understand that what that means also when you then discuss and have to take decisions on security and defense issues, for example, and learn from what we would call the wrongdoings of the past, where we were just seen as someone who could be moved around. There was relocations, as I said, to protect the sovereignty of the kingdom in East Greenland. At some point in time, people were moved and created a town because of sovereignty. There was relocations to build the US Bitufik space base of the Inuit of their homelands in order to create such a military installation. So we really have to be careful now in terms of making sure to understand the governance systems we have and be very careful not to repeat past wrongdoings.
Lars, you.
Yeah, I want to thank Nordic Council who have make it possible for UArctic to bring a lot of youth. So you talk about youth. This conference, people my age are quite predominant. If you go to the UArctic Congress we had in Bodø last year, and we will have in Faroe Islands together with the Danish Kingdom of Denmark chairship in Faroe Islands, there will be the biggest conference ever in history in May, and we will be the same number of people like we have here, and there will be at least 20-30% youth in that conference. And that's thanks to Nordic Council, Government of Canada, and others. We put together 7 million NOK to give scholarships so we can get the youth there. And that's a science conference in Faroe Islands coming summer. That will be fantastic. It's under umbrella, which is we call UArctic North to North. We have been running this for 20 years. We have sent several hundred students between the norths every year, from university to university, scholars to scholar. And this is quite interesting. It is possible. It is managed. Yukon University run the Canadian program for North to North. University of Greenland run the Kingdom of Denmark program for North to North. And Alta campus of UIT run the Norwegian program for North to North. So it is possible to let North manage North to North and make it work and be a success. And we have been done so for very, very many years. And that is really a hope for the future, because we build this relationship between different Norths and youth, because that is the future leaders. And you need to love each other across borders and know each other and have those histories. So I think there is a fantastic hope. And this shows Canada, Nordic work together. The only thing we need is some government stepping up and doubling those money, because there are so many more youths who want to go on trips. So please, whoever.
I guess ownership to our own future is key. So I guess what we can take from our discussion until now is bottom-up and youth keywords. I would like you to open up for questions. Oh, a lot of hands, and it's a lot of light here, but please. Do we have a mic? Yeah, good. And please present yourself as well.
I'm a journalist from the Kingdom of Denmark. I happened to survive the Cold War, and I can assure you that we had some kind of tensions looking alike today, those days. The Western approach to the state-to-state tensions of those days were to increase the people-to-people exchange in forms of science, cooperation, education, arts, culture, and tourism. It seems to me, 50 years later, that the Western approach to state tensions is to decrease the exchange of people to people and restrict the opportunities for people to meet across the tension-hit borders. Which is your approach to that, and which are the barriers for increasing the people-to-people exchange across borders?
Inga?
Well, if you're talking about Russia today, I think the people-to-people contacts are very hampered by the internal policies of Russia, which means that Russians having contacts with the outside world are in acute danger. So that at least is a very real concern. And in addition to that, of course, restrictions coming from the sanctions, which are caused by Russia's war against Ukraine. I hope things can be different in the future, because we all would like to have the people-to-people exchanges that were possible in the 1990s, but today it simply is not possible, and it's not because we don't want them to.
What we did in the 70s was actually keeping inviting them, and put pressure on Russia to open the borders. But that approach I haven't seen yet.
Sarah.
Yes, for the Inuit Circumpolar Council, our fellow Inuit in Russia, they are our members equal to the Inuit from Alaska, Canada, and Galashitinland. And we have, with open eyes, decided to stand together also in 2022, and we do so in 2026. And it is not uncomplicated. It is very complicated. There are difficulties in meeting in person. But I think the important thing is to, as you say, keeping the door open to the people-to-people cooperation and being mindful of the situation that we do know exists for some Russian citizens that engage with, on the international arena. But the point is to keep the door open and let it be a self-determined choice whether they will actually then join in person. I do want to say also, and make it clear, that the Arctic Council is working, and I'm here in Romsat, Tromsø, first and foremost because we had some important meetings on Monday, 2 days ago, and that was the Senior Arctic Officials Chair meeting with the permanent participants, which was a format that we were very, very happy that the Norwegian chairship supported and initiated for us to continue meeting as indigenous peoples, and that is circumpolar, all the permanent participants, in person or online, and continue also giving our political direction to the Arctic Council. We've taken very, very much part in finding the way ahead together with the Norwegian chairship and now also with the chairship of the Kingdom of Denmark. And it's extremely important that we continue to do so, exactly because the core purpose, intent and spirit of the Arctic Council is that. And that the work of the Arctic Council is something that is near to us as peoples of the Arctic, and therefore we also need to be the ones to prioritize how to ensure that that work continues and which parts of the work actually does. I do want to raise one concern, and I think that, and I'm fully understanding also the situation seen from a state perspective, but I do think that there was a little bit too much rush around the decisions in 2022. We are seeing the consequences in our ability to co-create knowledge, but also protect data and ensure that we have access to sharing knowledge and data across state borders. And here the research institutions do also play a role. So I really hope that all research institutions look to the decisions by the Arctic Council, understand that the statements that came out both of the 2023 Arctic Council meeting and the one that came out from 2025 were consensus statements with all states and permanent participants, and that in order to implement what these statements say, we do need to have a cooperation. But the barriers are there because they were introduced in a very sort of, what do you call it, in a very sort of abrupt way. And I think it's been difficult also for research institutions to figure out what can you do and what can you not, or should you do or should you not. So the Arctic Council, I think, has been clear in wanting to maintain knowledge production across state borders, but there are others who are still upholding some barriers.
I have several questions, I have to admit, but I have to bring in the audience again.
Thank you. My name is Gøril Johansen. I'm a former Norwegian diplomat. I moved back home to Tromsø to work from the north with development. And you speak a lot about security, Greenland, Canada, the Arctic Council. And of course, people living in the north, we worry about security. But when we go to work in the morning, we create, we innovate, we speak about having a good life. And there's one element missing from your conversation a little bit, because the Nordic Council of Ministers is very into innovation, new solution, businesses. And I would like to say that between Northern Norway and Finland and Sweden, there are a lot of business cooperations going on, young people meeting, entrepreneurs. So how do you see the business perspective growing stronger in that conversation between the Nordics in the Arctic? Thank you.
Good question. Who would like to jump in? Ole Martin, please.
The one not having a job is going to answer about business. This is interesting. No, what I really liked about, I've actually just taken part in one sort of Nordic Council of Ministers event ever, and that was this thing we called Generation Barents. No, not Generation Barents, but Generation North Atlantic. Where we gathered youth from all of the North Atlantic countries, and we traveled around in Lofoten, which is basically my backyard. But it was very nice during that event. We got to meet entrepreneurs, young people starting their own companies. We were at this sort of hotel/bar in Henningsvær, and I think that these events where you get to meet the innovation that are happening in the regions, especially for us young people, not just to get inspired, but also to see that it's actually possible for us to innovate, to create, to be entrepreneurs in our home region. So I think to still have projects similar to that, where young people can actually see the opportunities and see the proof that these opportunities are real. I think that's a very good thing to keep going forward with.
Lars?
It's of course a challenge for universities to not only produce bureaucrats, but make people who actually do real things in addition. And one thing we have in the Arctic now is we have an entrepreneur somewhere in the world who give us some money, and we have an entrepreneurship fund where we actually donate quite a sum of money to young people from anywhere in the Arctic who have an innovation idea. But what they get is some money. But what they also get, and that's the most important, is that scholars from nearby universities will be their mentor for a year or two. And this entrepreneur who gave the actual cash for this, he brings some of his friends in business in the world, and they continue every month to have a mentorship talk with those young entrepreneurs in the Arctic to help them think business, help them think forward, and that's their gift. So we see now out of 5 different years we've given this out, 4 out of 5 are successful now moving into big businesses. And that is way higher score than you get in Silicon Valley. So the Arctic peoples are way smarter and much better building businesses. So just continue to invest in the youth of the North.
Inga?
Well, at least I can confirm that creating strong economies and business opportunities is also very high on the Norwegian government's list. If you read our High North strategy, it's defined as one of the 5 priorities. And I think I can speak even for the governments of Sweden and Finland, saying that this is very much also on their program. But I think it's a little bit up to the entrepreneurs of the North, the regions of the North also, to identify what the challenges are, what the impediments are, and where the national governments need to do a better job. So there needs to be a strong dialogue there also. And I think that organizing across borders is also very helpful in this regard, simply because northern Sweden, Finland, Norway, there are some similarities, but they're also complementary in many ways. The business opportunities, I mean, they stretch from traditional Sami reindeer husbandry and all until the very newest technologies. There are all kinds of business opportunities, and they can be combined in new ways as well. So it's really a landscape full of opportunity, and what the governments can do to help that bring about. That also is a little bit up to the entrepreneurs and environments in the North to help us define.
So be creative.
Yes.
Absolutely, I totally agree. But I think that we usually forget in these sort of conversations is that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. And we can't have that everyone starts their own company. The world would not run that way. We need to speak about career opportunities in the North. And what I get so angry about when I'm a student in Trondheim, I see countless Norwegian employers wanting to grab the students right out of university. We every week see new employers. I have never seen one Swedish or Finnish employer coming to our and trying to hunt us down. There are almost no sort of connection between the Norwegian, Swedish, and Finnish employers. And that makes me so angry. How I know that LKAB, for example, with this big mining company in Sweden, they are screaming for competent workers in Kiruna, and that's just an hour and a half drive from the Norwegian border. Why aren't they recruiting more in Norway? And the same goes for the other way around. Norwegian engineering companies are screaming for a more competent workforce. In the north of Finland right now, it can be hard for engineers to find work. Why aren't we recruiting there? I think that's a very important question that we need to ask ourselves, and we need to do something about that.
So listen. That's a great idea. You should have a project, I guess. Seek funding.
We will.
Sarah?
Yes, in the Inuit Circumpolar Council, we've been inspired by the Nordic, and I'll see if I can say it in Norwegian, grænsehindringskortlægning. Grænsehindringskortlægning in Danish. Yes, the mapping of barriers to cooperation. And we have then focused that with support from the Danish Parliament on mapping the barriers across borders for Inuit to Inuit business cooperation. And that's a challenge because our states, the states we live in as Inuit, are very, very different, much more different, I would say, than the Nordics. But inspired by that mapping that the Nordics are doing, we are now doing that across Inuit homelands, and of course with the aim of improving business, Inuit to Inuit business cooperation and trade, which, you know, seemingly would seem that it's not so difficult, but it is. And it is exactly because we might have different kinds of veterinary rules or for production of different kinds of, you know, fine foods that we do as Inuit as well from our own resources, or even just, you know, trading our arts and crafts. There's so many barriers to all of that. And so we hope that that mapping will be helpful. And maybe also be able to bridge into the Nordic as well, because you think that there was a more flexible world in terms of having this cooperation based on so many years, but when you look into it, it's full of barriers.
Another project. Last question from the audience, or maybe two more questions.
Thank you very much. I'm Nadine Kass. I'm from the University of Zurich in the Swiss Forum on Foreign Policy, and I would be interested what foreign actors that are interested in collaborating with the Arctic as well can support this Nordic-Arctic collaboration and can be a beneficiary for the Arctic instead of just jumping in and wanting their own piece of the Arctic. Thank you so much.
Remember that question. One more question, wasn't it? Yeah. In the back.
Hello, thank you. My name is Puya. I'm a Canadian international lawyer. The question I had was, capacity building is one thing, but decision making is another. And I find all too often decision making happens in Ottawa or Brussels as opposed to in northern communities. So aside from building out capacity, how do we move decision-making from the south to the north in a meaningful way? Thank you.
Two kind of different questions. Bringing in Europe and the more local perspective. Who would like to start?
I take the first. I can take the first.
You can take the first.
You want to give a piece of the Arctic to some foreign? No.
Yes, I'll explain how we do it. The University of the Arctic is a club of more than 200 universities plus 55 in Russia, and it's basically every university in the world who do any substantial polar research are in this organization, and that's a way for non-Arctic academics to join into the Arctic in a relatively useful way, because in the Arctic you need to actually work with the indigenous peoples and follow their settings, and you need to respect the North and behave decently, but it's also a way in to work with Northerners. So it's very simple. If you are in academia, you just join my organization. But I would comment on business, actually, because one of the big problems in investments in the North is when you have the green shift in Europe, you want money in the North, or in Greenland. And that's simply because I'm a geologist, so the resources are there. It's nature who make you go there. It's not because you are mean or something. It's just that that's where the things are. So you go for it. And the question, how do you do it, is the big question. And then you are into the decision-making process, because you can sit in the south and say, it's critically for us in Europe to have neodymium. Therefore, we open a mine in Greenland or northern Sweden or somewhere in Norway. But if the local people don't think it's a good idea to make a big hole in the ground, how do you develop the technology at your technical university, or how do we develop the decision-making so that local people actually they set the premises for you to get that neodymium you need for whatever. And if you do it, you open that mine now, you run it for some years, and suddenly there is a different world order. So you're happy buying from China. Then you just drop the thing in the north. You build a community. There's a trust, a hope for families to live for generations, and certainly just give up. That's how capitalism works. So there is a kind of a clash between that southern perspective of decision making and the local need to, okay, we can do something that give you the resources you need, but then the contract is, you do it with us for generations, not for hours.
And that brings in the other question as well, local decision making. Anyone? Inga?
Well, to answer the first question first, I think to engage in Arctic issues, you can do wherever you sit in the world. The Nordic countries, Canada, the US, they are open societies. There's nothing stopping you from making contact in the fields where you yourself are engaged. So please do. And if necessary, you can approach our embassy in Bern, but I think you'll manage on your own if you really want to engage. I think how to bring decisions down to the local level, that is really a political question. And the answer depends on where you are, what country you are in, because they're structured differently. And I think it's not easy to give, an answer valid everywhere. But I think the realization that we need both local, regional definition of issues, and some of them can be resolved on a local basis and should be, but not all of them. Sometimes you need also interaction with national governments to be able to bring about solutions. So there I think the answer will be quite detailed, depending on what we are talking about.
Time flies, really. So I guess we need to sum up. I had a chat with Lars yesterday, and we were thinking more in the scenario way. And he said, well, let's look at back to the future. So let's say we're in 2050, and things are quite good in the Arctic. How did we get there?
Well, I'm also going to just answer the questions that were asked in answering your question. I think already now we have decisions taken in the Arctic. The question is, are they implemented? Are they respected by the governments of the states in the south? So we have already representative institutions of indigenous peoples, of us as nations, as for example Gardaashlit Nunaat. But the question is there a full respect for that right of self-determination from a state level? The question is the Norwegian government implementing the decisions taken and listening and fully recognizing the decisions taken by the Norwegian Sami parliament, for example? And that's what you should be asking. And then you should also see the value and the necessity of having that self-determination process. If we're going to ensure resilient Arctic communities, that's where it begins. So I think that the question should really be that for each of the states, but also as an Arctic cooperation and institutions in Arctic cooperation. And for the foreign actors, well, there's so many that are interested. We can just see it from the applications to becoming observers in the Arctic Council. And exactly for that reason, that is why we need the Arctic Council. We need a council where we as Arctic states and indigenous peoples of the Arctic are the ones setting the agenda. Because those foreign interests will also want to be agenda setting in the Arctic. So understanding the value in terms of the global development of having that institution and protecting that institution is so important these days. And understanding also that the interest in the Arctic we are seeing from non-Arctic states and non-Arctic actors is there to stay. And therefore, us having the need and the responsibility to continue developing the institutionalized cooperation with indigenous peoples at the table. So I think that 2050, hopefully we'll see all of that truly implemented. But the point is, we already have the structures. We already have decided to do so on paper, but are we actually doing that? Are we walking the talk?
You will have the final word, Ole Martin, because
Well,
you're
I have
the
the
future,
final
really.
What I think is 40 seconds. What I think is the most important to get from this session is that Of course, cooperation is important, but it's important to have a goal in mind when we are cooperating, that we have a vision of in 20 years, the next generation of youth will then be adult. We will have a generation of employers and employees that are more interconnected in the region. We will have closer ties with different organizations across the Arctic. Maybe, yes, now I'm lost, so I was taken aback there.
2 seconds left. So excellent. A big applause to the panelists.
Thank you.
Ja, tack.